Hey, Dustin, Smoking Eagles Rod Shop. Today I'm going to be upgrading the oil pump system in Carmen Electra. Now, if you don't know, she has a Buick 455 and they are prone to oil pressure issues, especially at idle. Now, she's, like so many others, has fallen victim to the gremlin. So I went to TA Performance and I picked up some parts that I think will help remedy the situation. I've got an oil pump rebuild kit, I've got a idle booster plate, and I've got an oil pressure regulator. Now, I've never done this before, so I've really only got two options: fake it till I make it, or join the fail army. I'm sure you guys will enjoy either outcome. So anyway, if you haven't already, make sure you like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends. It's pretty quick, pretty easy, and I appreciate all your support. It really helps the channel grow. And yeah, I don't know. Let's go make history. Or not. On wrenching. All right, guys, so it's time to get right at it. Now, if you've noticed here, I've selected the correct t-shirt for the job. White Chevy truck shirt. We're going to be doing an oil pump, so I'm sure I probably won't get dirty at all. Let me flip you around and I'll show you what we got going on here. So this 455 has an external oil pump. All the Buicks do. And to get to that, I guess the correct way to do this would probably be to pull the timing cover. Now, in order to pull this timing cover, I'd have to pull the harmonic balancer, the water pump, drain all the antifreeze, take the alternator belt off, and the power steering pump belt, and all that other crap, rip the distributor out of this thing just to get that on the bench, make it a little easier to work on. So I've opted for the second method, which is toss it way up in the air, let everything fall directly in my face while I attempt to do something I've never done before. So I'll get you guys on the tripod and we'll get right at it. As you can see, first thing I need to do is pull the oil filter off of here. Now, I didn't drain any of the oil out of the engine. I'm hoping that I don't have to. I can just let whatever's going to run out, and then just top it off when we're done. All right, so I got the oil filter off there. Next thing we got to do is pull all these bolts. Now, when I put this together the first time, you have to remember that some of these bolts are longer and shorter than other ones. So when I put this together, everything was nice and clean because I went through this oil pump and cleaned everything up, made sure everything was nice and clean. It's got a brand new gasket. Now, these gears may try and fall out of here. Hopefully they don't, but we have replacements. And pull these out of here. I'm guessing when I pull one, they're all going to try and come out all at once. Like so. So we've got a pin, two gears, and a long shaft that goes all the way up into the distributor, bottom of the distributor there. Pull that out of there. So I'll get you up in here. As you can see, so this side is the side with the gear that goes all the way up and plugs into the bottom of the distributor, and this side here just has the idle gear or whatever you want to call it. I don't know exactly what it should be called. I'm going to obviously clean this surface up real good, but this pump hasn't been on here very long, just you know, during our burnouts and since you guys seen the videos of us putting her together. So go over to the bench and inspect our pieces. So here's the stock housing. Here's our old gasket, which is actually probably reusable. Like I said, it hasn't been on there very long, but it is squished a little bit, so we're going to toss it. We've got plenty of them. Now, what I wanted you guys to see that I was trying to pull out with my pliers, this is why you don't want to be the Permatex guy. Look at that big chunk of Permatex right there, stuck in this pump, and that was not there when I put this together. All right, guys, so I took this over to the parts washer and rinsed a lot of the oil off of there. Now, it was leaking a little bit, but it wasn't leaking enough that it ever dripped on the floor. A little bit of oil leakage is not that big a deal as long as you check your oil like you're supposed to. Anyway, I loosened up the pressure relief valve. It's just a 1-inch socket. And so we're going to unscrew this. I didn't clean up a bunch of the old hardware. It's still just kind of oily, but that out of there. Pull gasket off of there. There it is. This is a little pressure relief plunger. So it's cleaned up a little bit. Clean it up. So what I've done, guys, is I was pushing down on that plunger and I could see down through this hole here. That's obviously where that pressure relief valve goes, but I've kicked the little thingy sideways, little cap. So I need to get it pushed back down in there and get the tab over where it belongs without breaking it or screwing it all up, because I don't have one of those with our kit. So yeah, we're in uncharted territory for me. Aha! Good to go. Perfect. Plunger still works. Perfect. So I'm looking down in there. I don't know if you guys can see that in the camera. Let me get you in a little better position. Right there, see it down in there? A little bit of orange. That Permatex is still down in there. It's stuck in that spring. I've got to get that out of there. Don't drop that, dude. Come on now. Touched it. It's such a big piece. Look at that, guys. Look at that. That will destroy your engine if it gets in the wrong spot. I mean, how are my lifters and push rods and valves? How is anything supposed to get oil if this gets wedged anywhere in my cam bearings, your main bearings, anywhere? That is insane. All right, so I've got this all cleaned up, and we got that big chunk of Permatex out of there. It's just huge. Now you can see why these oil pumps have a tendency to fail. This is an aluminum housing, and these gears rest directly on this pump like this and spin like hell. And they just eat the aluminum housing. Now if you look at this gear, look how gnarly that gear is. And look what it's doing to this pump housing. It's just eating away at that pump housing and destroying it. And that's why you lose all your pressure. They say if this is too bad, you need to get a new one. I don't know what they deem as too bad, but this one's got a hell of a little groove in it there, and she's pretty ate up. But we're going to send it. Don't have another one and don't have time to get another one. I assume this groove in here isn't supposed to be there, and that is created from this sitting on here and spinning as well. I've got this all cleaned up, got the Permatex out of there. I think we're about ready to go rip into those new parts and read some instructions and see how we're supposed to do this so that I don't epically fail. Although if something does fail, I'm going to blame the Permatex guy. And I'm going to blame this housing as being worn out. Always got to have a scapegoat. Alright guys, so as you can see, I've got everything spread out all over my workspace here. And I've opened up all the packages, read through all the instructions about 17 times, just to make sure that there's no possible way I can explain this jigsaw puzzle to you guys in less than 47 tries. So here's try number 1, and we'll see if we can knock this out. Bear with me for a few minutes here while I explain this to you. If you don't really care about any of this stuff, you can just skip past this to me, I don't know, dropping bolts down the drain or something. I don't know, but let me try here for you. Now, I've got all this paperwork here, and the first thing that I opened up was the oil pump rebuild kit stuff. So that came with the gears, the shaft that runs off of the distributor. It also came with a new relief valve, a whole array of springs here depending on what application you have. And there's this paperwork here. I've highlighted a few things I just wanted to go over with you guys. Now it's telling me to use the white spring on 76 model, blah, 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 blah. Basically, our car is on that list. It wants me to use this white spring, and that's supposed to boost our oil pressure to about 60 pounds. It also gives us the list, this little diagram here, not a list, and it gives you what all these different colored springs applications should be and the oil pressures that they're supposed to give you and how to install them in your housing and figure out exactly which one's going to work right for you. It looks like to me a good majority of all 455s are going to take this white spring. Now, this does also apply to 400s, 430s. So there's a lot to kind of read through and make sure you don't screw anything up here depending on what your vehicle is. It also came with this note here, which says for 61 to 63, 215 aluminum block V8 options, you have to drill a hole in this booster plate. And this is a booster plate from TA Performance, but they also, you can go online and you can buy other kits that just have a wear plate because, again, this housing gets all wore out. And you put a wear plate in there, and that's supposed to basically renew the housing and give you a lot of life. And it's steel, it's not aluminum, so it ought to last a long time. They also got these couple of these because I had multiple kits giving me a little information that I'm supposed to submerge the oil pump in clear oil and turn it by hand before installing it in the engine. So basically they want to make sure all this stuff is good and lubed up before you bolt it all together. You definitely don't want to spin it around in there dry. It tells me what gaskets to use where. Basically, we've got a full gasket, and it's going to go directly on our housing right here, in between the housing and our new booster plate. And then you're going to use a factory gasket, which again, I've got a handful of them here because each kit kind of came with gaskets. So that's cool because I get lots of spares. But then basically you bolt this on. This one doesn't go to this one. Oh, yeah, it does. I had it upside down. I also have a gasket for V6, or not V6, but the aluminum block V8s and stuff, because they have a different housing or bolt pattern or something. So that's just making sure that we put our gasket together in the correct orders. So we've got that all figured out. Then you can run. So if you get a booster plate like this, and then you get a high volume pump kit as well, you're actually could potentially be stacking multiple plates on this. So they give you a whole bunch of different bolts that they want you to use, and they tell you to make sure that your bolts don't stick out past your housing more than a ½ inch. Your housing and whatever stack of shims and plates and garbage you got contraption here that you've put together. So what I did is I went through all the bolts and I stuck them up through my plate like so, and then I've got a little machinist ruler. I've got it set at a ½ inch, and they said ½ inch is max, so I can set it right down on here and I can go, oh yep, that's going to work perfectly. Now I did that. I went around and checked all my bolts, and 2 of them are longer than the rest of them, And what I've done is I've went on the housing here. I don't know if you guys will be able to see it, but I've went on the housing here and I've marked it with arrows, so I know when I bolt this all back together and in the heat of the moment, I don't forget which two bolts need to be the long ones. Also, we have our adjustable oil pressure regulator that we've got. So I'll show you guys that real quick. I got that opened up out of the package. Basically, there was, if you remember, there was just a bolt or a plug that goes in here. This spring and this relief valve went down in there, and then the spring went in top of it, just like this. And then we had that plug and the little seal. Now, their pressure relief or regulator replaces that plug, and it gives you the ability to adjust the tension on your spring. So if you weren't going to use this and you were going to use your factory plug, or we weren't going to use that, we were going to use our factory plug, I would install this white spring because that's what the paperwork over there tells me to do. It says to reinstall my cup or relief, whatever that thing is, and put our spring in there, our white spring, and that's going to boost our pressure to about 60 pounds. Now, with their regulator kit that we have here, they gave me a brand new factory spring, and they want me to use this factory spring with their kit because it's adjustable and will put more or less tension on that spring. So now I actually have the spring they provided me. I have the spring from the rebuild kit that's a factory spring, and I also have the original factory spring. So we've got lots of potential to screw this up, but we got extra parts. They also gave me a gasket for it. One of the other kits came with a gasket as well. So, I mean, we've got plenty of gaskets to go here. One thing I did do is I looked at my old relief valve and I looked at the one that came in the rebuild kit. And the one in the rebuild kit actually has a hole that goes all the way through. The factory one does not. It only goes through one side to the center. Also, the one that came in the rebuild kit that I got, and it's a Melling rebuild kit. It looks like it's in a lot better shape. It was machined a lot more precise, and so yeah, that's the one we're going to use, and we're going to just toss the factory one in our little parts bin or back in a box or something. We'll stick it on a shelf somewhere. So we're going to be using that and that. I also in the kit here, this tells you that when you bolt this together, you should have 10 psi at idle with an increase of 10 psi per 1,000 RPMs, which is pretty standard. And they're saying at about $3,000, you should have roughly 30 psi. So what I'm going to do, our goal here is basically when a Buick would warm up, when you first started up, man, she'd have 30 to 40 pounds. Sounds great, worked great, but as the engine would warm up, it would just continuously drop all the way down to where the gauge just read 0. Now, I don't think we had 0 pounds. I think we had between, 3 to 5, maybe 6 or 8 pounds. But because your gauge covers 130 pounds of pressure, it's really hard to gauge. And once she goes to 0, then you're just nervous, right? So I'm hoping to be able to use this adjustable regulator here. And this booster plate is actually supposed to not give you high volume or high pressure. It's designed to give you a new wear plate or wear surface for your housing. And it's also designed to boost idle oil pressure to try and bring that up a little bit so you don't have to, you can still be within like your 30 to 40, maybe even 50 pounds at like $3,000 to $4,000, maybe $5,000 range, depending on your engine build. I mean, of course, we're running the stock motor and stock everything, so we have absolutely no reason to go over $4,000 because these motors peak at about 3,500. Anything beyond that is just a waste of your time. But anyway, we want to be able to have 30 to 50 pounds of oil pressure up there. But the main thing I really want is to be able to be at idle at engine temp and have at least 10 pounds at 600 RPMs or whatever. So maybe even 15 or 20 pounds would be nice. But anyway,
Not asking for gold, just, you know, a little bit of silver. Anyway, got that paperwork here. Now, it tells me how this paper made it to the bottom page in the stack. It basically just goes over the whole way of aligning everything, setting it all up. And what they want you to do is they want you to have between 2 and 3 thousandths of play in your gears. So basically when this is on here, it's assembled in the engine. Well, actually this plate's on here, but I don't want to juggle a bunch of stuff. But anyway, when your gears are on here and this is bolted into the engine, they only want 2 to 3 thousandths in play. They only want that gear to be able to move up and down 2 to 3 thousandths. 3 max and 1 minimum, but 2 to 3 is optimum according to all the paperwork that I've read there. Now, they really want you to, like I said, mentioned earlier, they really want you to tear the timing cover off, and I just really don't want to do that. So there's a second way they show you, or they kind of explain to you how to do it, where you stick your gears up in there and then use a straight edge, and then you can measure with the depth gauge and stuff. So I'm a machinist, have been for years and years, so I'm pretty handy with calipers, mics, and random, you know, precise measuring instruments. So I'm sure we can figure out a way to check that and get our spacing and shims correctly. And it also tells me in here, you know, basically use a feeler gauge, figure out your spacing, and then add 4 thousandths to your measurement when you're using a booster plate, which we're going to be doing. And if you're not using a booster plate, or, you know, they give you all the different scenarios to go through here and what gaskets you're using to get you real close out of the gate. And then they want you to pull the distributor and then check your end play from the top. So really don't want to pull the distributor out of the car, but we're going to do it because, you know, there's only so many shortcuts you can take, right? So once we get this all bolted together and get it on the car, we'll do the little dry fit. We'll drop the car, we'll jerk the distributor out, we'll check it for play. They just want to make sure it's not binding up in there, and obviously if you have a whole bunch of play, that's not good either. So we'll be able to stick my little primer tool down in there, and we'll be able to turn it by hand and kind of feel if we've got the correct play and make sure everything is going good. So gives us our torque specs in here, all that fun stuff. Yeah, I even got the little shim kit here, and they're just different thicknesses and different colors for each thickness. And if you look right on here on the front, they tell you how thick each shim is. And basically when we bolt this all together and we figure out what our play is, if it's above or below the threshold of our 2 to 3 thousandths, then we can, oh, that was weird. Almost turned into a hog there for a second. Must be getting hungry. We can adjust our gaskets and everything accordingly to get the proper amount of spacing. One thing I did do, because these housings are just cast aluminum and they're kind of trash, I went and took a Dremel and I took some little needle files and I went down in all the oil passages that I could reach and get to, and I took as much flashing out of everything as I could and kind of smooth out the edges just so we get really good flow through there and really good pressure. I don't want oil kind of getting stuck anywhere. I also took their plate, this booster plate, and I did the same thing on the inside of all these holes that are cut out where the oil needs to flow through. It was pretty jagged and stuff because it was just cast, and then they machined the top and bottom surface. So I just took my Dremel in there with a little grindstone and just smoothed all those bumps out of there and made it kind of, you know, kind of smooth. And then I also went and radiused the edges so there's no sharp edges on any of the corners. And I set it down on top of my oil pump here like this. Kind of looked down through there and made sure any sharp edges that were sticking out, jagged edges that were sticking out, I just kind of, you know, radiused those down and smoothed them out a little bit. Basically ported the oil pump. Didn't take me very long, 20-30 minutes. Got it all cleaned up. Also in the instructions here, I believe it's on this page here, up at the top, it tells you to make sure that there are no giant gouges or scratches or nicks or burrs on any of your gears. And so I also took a little needle file with a little radius on the one side, and I just went around them all like this and just and hit all the edges. And then I also took flat file and just went right over the top real quick just to make sure there was no burrs or anything like that to cause premature wear on any of the parts when we assemble it all. I also did the tall gear, and I didn't get a new dowel pin that this gear rides on that goes up inside the housing. One thing that I don't like about this pin, I wish they would have sent a pin, or somebody would provide a pin, whether it be Melling or TA or whoever. But this pin, if you look at this housing here, you can see a really deep groove right in this housing here. Well, when I looked at my pin, it's just a dowel pin. Well, these dowel pins are precision machined on the outside, but not on the ends. The ends are just the ends, right? Well, it had this big concave surface on one side that was just eating this housing. So I went over on the belt sander, which I don't recommend doing this. If you're going to do this, I'm going to tell you now, find a mill, make sure it's square. Use V-block, whatever you got to do. I didn't do that because don't have any of that stuff and don't have that kind of time today. So I just went over the old belt sander, held her flat, gave her the old spin job there, and I took that surface down so that it was nice and flat on both ends, and then I hit it with some like 320 or 400, just scuffed it real good and took the belt lines out of it because my belt sander runs like an 80 belt or something. But anyway, I know that surface may not be perfectly true, but it's a hell of a lot better than digging a big ass groove in my brand new booster plate like it did in this aluminum housing. At least, hopefully it will sit pretty flat. I did measure it with my calipers. Again, like I said, I'm a machinist, so I measured it with my calipers, rotated it around, and it seems to be pretty damn square. So I'm happy with that. That's going to be a lot better than what we had before. And that's going to go right in there, and that goes up in that housing. I did check, and there really isn't a length on that. Obviously, I didn't want to take a ½ inch off of this, but it sits, when this is in the car, this all sits up in here, and gravity holds that pin down, and this gear sits on top, and it sticks way up in the top of that housing, and the top is just empty air. So obviously you wouldn't want to take a ½ inch off of that because then there wouldn't be a whole lot holding this dowel pin lined up straight. But I probably only took about, I don't know, 30 thousandths off of it doing both sides. So I didn't take a whole lot off. If it fails, blame me because I did it. Anyway, I think I did a pretty good job explaining all that stuff to you guys pretty quick. Covered everything that I wanted to cover.
All right, guys, so we're at our oil pump housing, and I've inserted the drive gear for the distributor. Now, they want you to take a depth gauge and figure out the depth from the top of the gear to your gasket surface here. Now, let's be honest, most people don't have access to a depth gauge unless you're a machinist or a speed shop. But everybody has feeler gauges, and that is the other option they give you. So I'm going to show you how I decided to do this and maybe give you a couple of ideas on how you can do it. So I've dug out this giant parallel that's very thick, and of course it's ground true. So this gives me a lot of surface area on that gear. I just put it right up here and push right in the center, hold it nice and flat, and then I check this side and this side, starting with my smallest feeler gauge and then working up until one sticks in there, which for me happened to be the 4/1000 shim that sticks. The 3/1000 goes in okay. Then I turn my parallel the opposite direction and I check the housing on this side, and this side I got the same reading. Now, if you don't have one of these jumbo parallels, a good set of calipers is a great option. They have a very good straight edge. You can do the exact same method. You're going to want to push and put pressure right in the center of that gear. That's going to give you a nice good straight edge, and then you're going to be able to use your feeler gauge and do the same thing. Now, I've done both methods, both directions. I'm not going to drop my calipers on camera, but to double check that, you can take your calipers and put them in the bottom of the pocket, go down, measure the depth of your pocket. Now, my pocket depth here is 1 inch 120 thousandths. So now I can take my gear. I can measure my gear. It is 1 inch 123 thousandths. So with my feeler gauges, I determined that I'm between 3 and 4 thousandths, so I'm going to split the difference at 3.5. When I measured my depth here, I'm at 1 inch 120 thousandths, and my gear is 1 inch 123 thousandths, which also gives me the same answer of the 3 to 3.5 thousandth range. So let's go over to the bench and see what we need to do next. So TA Performance tells you that you should take your thickness or difference between your gear and your housing, which we came up with 3.5 thousandths. And if you're using your stock housing, you're supposed to add 2 thousandths, I believe. If you're using a new wear surface plate or booster plate, you're to add 4 thousandths. So I've done that and I've come up with 7.5 thousandths. Now, they want you to use a gasket or shims or a combination of the two to come up with your 7.5 thousandths. Now, if you remember, I have a whole pile of gaskets and shims over there of all different thicknesses to accommodate. So I've went through and I've measured every single one in 3 locations with my 0 to 1 inch mics and come up with this gasket here. Now, we're shooting for 7.5 thousandths. This is about 8.5 thousandths. They want your gap to be 1 thousandth minimum, 3 thousandths maximum, with a 2 to 3 thousandths optimum operating range. Now, if you look at this housing, our factory housing was still pumping oil. It was still pumping, just at idle. Once the car got warm, it would lose all its pressure. It clearly had way more clearance than, the 1 to 3 thousandths range. So, with that in mind, instead of stacking gaskets, because I just don't think that that's a very effective way to prevent leaks, I've decided to go with this 8 to 8.5 thousandth thick gasket, which is going to give me an extra 1 thousandth of clearance, worst case scenario. Now, obviously, more clearance is a little bit better than less clearance because you don't want to eat your housing. Because again, yeah, the bottom is going to be steel now, but the top is still aluminum. The next step, we need to bolt all this together dry. Need to torque all my bolts down to my torque setting, which is 5 to 8 foot-pounds. Our gauge only works with inch-pounds, so in order to get your proper inch-pound setting, you just times it by 12, so that gives us 84, because 5 to 8, we went with 7. I'll give us 84 inch-pounds. Now we're going to bolt this all together, tighten it all up, then we're going to drop the car on the ground, we're going to jerk the distributor out, and I'll show you how I'm going to check the end plate. Alright guys, so I dropped the car. We're going to pull this distributor out so we can go down there and we can check the end plate. Now I'm not going to unhook any of my plug wires or anything. We're just going to pull the cap off, make sure we know which direction it is, and like always, I'll probably mark it with a permanent marker just so it'll get us back close. We don't have to try and remember everything. All right, so we've pulled the distributor out and you can see the top of the oil pump drive gear. So now we're gonna rig up my little system for trying to measure the end play in that. All right guys, so what I've got is an old magnetic, whatever those are, reach tool, and the handle was missing. So we took a bolt and we screwed a bolt down in there, and I kind of ground the top of it kind of flat. And we've got our magnetic base and our indicator on here, and we've got this sitting all the way down, so our drive gear's all the way down. And now I'm going to lift up and down a handful of times, and you guys can watch on there, and we can see what the end play is. Dad and I think we got about 2 thousandths of play. So I'm trying to pull it nice and square.
yeah, so there I think you can get the idea that we're getting a little bit of play there, about 2000s.
So like I said, guys, it's just a magnet, one of the extendable magnets with the handle missing, and I just put a bolt in the end of it, and that's what we had our indicator on, and the magnet was just sitting directly on the top of that oil pump drive gear drive shaft that runs off the bottom of the distributor. Now I'm going to take my oil pump prime tool, cheap, 10, 15 bucks on Amazon. Look around, find you one worth the 10 bucks. We're going to stick it down in here and make sure that that oil pump turns free. As you can see, spins nice and easy. So now we've got to run the car back up in the air. We've got to take that pump back apart.
All right, guys, so I got the car back up in the air and I got the oil pump all tore apart. Now that we've checked all our clearances and stuff, we're ready to put this thing together for the last time. Now you're going to want to take a putty knife and some Vaseline, and you're going to want to pack this lower housing where I've got the arrows here about half full of Vaseline. Then you're going to take your gears and your dowel pin, and you're going to want to dunk them in some oil and fully coat them in oil like you can see in the video. And then you're going to take them over and you're just going to put them in this housing just like you did before. And what that's going to do is that's going to force all that Vaseline to fully fill that gear housing. If it's not clear full, you're just going to take your putty knife, just finish packing that baby full. And then I like to take a dry rag, put a little bit of rubbing alcohol on it, and just wipe off my gasket surface so it's nice and dry and clean. And then you're going to take your lower housing, your plate, your gaskets, everything that you've got, and you're just going to put it all back together and then torque it all down to spec. I wanted to get that all on camera for you guys, but unfortunately when I went back and looked at my video, the camera just didn't get a good shot of what was going on, and my arm was kind of in front of the camera for about half of it, so unfortunately I couldn't go back and redo it because I had everything torqued down. But hopefully this is a good enough explanation for you guys.
So I'm going to reuse the old oil filter just because all we're going to do is prime this thing, and then I'm going to put fresh oil in this and do an oil change before our burnouts coming up in a couple days. So anyway, I just had the old filter that I took off, had it draining in my drain pan. I just pre-filled it. I know some guys say pre-fill them, some guys say don't, but we're priming this pump, and these external oil pumps have a tendency to suck. So that should help that prime itself pretty quick and easy. Having that full of oil. Wipe this off. No sense in running dirty oil through a brand new filter when this filter literally came off yesterday. So we can drop the car and prime this pump and see what we get. Alright, so a lot of you guys have seen me do this before, but the way this works is you just slide this down in here, engage it with your oil pump, and then let her rip, and hope it makes oil pressure. I'm going to slide this drill in pointed the other direction. And you get all that Vaseline on there because it came up through the Vaseline from the bottom. All right, so I'm gonna fire this up. I just got it turning a little bit to make sure we are engaged. I'm gonna set you guys in the car, and you guys can watch and tell me if we get oil pressure, and then I'll go back and watch the video and see what you guys see. All right, so as you guys saw, we got about 60 pounds of pressure. I'm gonna let that pump just a little bit longer. I'm happy with that. All right, so you guys see me toss distributors in before. I'm going to do it again on these Buick distributors. They have this O-ring on here, so I like to put a little bit of wheel bearing grease around there, A, to keep oil from leaking, which really doesn't really happen, but also to allow it to rotate easily when we go to set the timing. And then I squirt a bunch of 30 weight on the gear just so we know it's got good lubrication, at least when we put it in. It may never get it again, but it's got it now. Now this normally points this way, and this needs to point that way. So when this is over like that, where we want it to be, that's facing like that. Yep. And here, not something like that down here. But we are now. Slide that down in there for the 5th try. There it is. And if that points right there like that, that's all she wrote. It's either right or it ain't. Put the bolt back in it. So that don't move. Distributor cap. So you need to loosen the distributor, move it just a smidge so I get about 6 degrees, and then it's idling at about, this is saying about 550, and I like it to idle about 6, so I need to bump that up just ever so slightly. But again, you know, I got that big ugly gaudy tack in there for fun, and it may not be the world's most accurate tack, because it came straight from China. So it was at about 520 idle. I moved it to 6 degrees. It's at 604.
I wondered if it, because you were advancing it further, so, yeah.
All right, guys, so I got this thing in here. Got it almost warmed up all the way. We got a 160 thermostat, so it's about to open. Looks like we're sitting at just over 25 pounds. almost 30 pounds of oil pressure. So I'll back this out tomorrow. The weather sucks today. It's all rainy and stuff. We'll back this out tomorrow, let it fully warm up, see what our idle oil pressure is, and then we'll run the tack up to about 3,500 to 4 grand and see where our oil pressure is at full RPM. And then we'll use our oil pressure regulator and we'll bump the oil pressure up or down a little bit or whatever we need to do. Probably not going to go down with it though, because we want as much as possible. So all right, guys, so I was going to warm the car up and double check that oil pump, make sure everything was working as planned. But unfortunately, it rained cats and dogs for 2 days, and the next day was our burnout competition. So in true Smoking Eagles Rod Shop style, I just loaded it on a trailer and we full sent it. So I'd like to report back that our oil pressure is considerably better at idle, at temp, operating temp. She runs about 15 to 18 pounds at idle, and I'm getting between 40 and 50 pounds at anywhere from 3 grand to 4 grand. I try to run about 3,500. So right in there, we've got plenty of oil pressure, which wasn't really an issue before. It was really that idle oil pressure that we didn't have any of. So yeah, if you got a Buick 455 or a 350 or any GM external oil pump, I hope you found this video helpful. And if you don't have one of those engines, I hope you found this video interesting and informative. And yeah, if you got any questions or comments, make sure you put them in the comments below. And I try and answer or chit chat with everybody as much as I can. I really enjoy talking with you guys. Here's the old oil pump that I took out. I think I'm just going to call that the idle gear, since it just kind of free runs off of this gear, which I would call the drive gear. You can see this one's all scarred up and beat up. That's why it was eating that housing, obviously. And this one's all shiny right here where it was wearing in that timing cover. Now, I did try and measure that with my calipers, and it's only about, I don't know, 2 to maybe 3 thousandths in a couple spots of wear on that. But you can definitely feel it with your hands. So we'll be keeping this around because it's pretty cool. Now, if you're new here and you haven't seen any of our other videos, make sure you check them out here. And if you aren't subscribed yet, go up there and subscribe. Come on, man, you got to keep up with us. So I really appreciate all our viewers, subscribers, everybody out there for helping us keep this train rolling. And I'm going to get working on our next project. And yeah, until next time, keep on wrenching. Peace.